back with a game that I really, really, really love, and I know Cameron had never checked it out before. And I used to tell him for many years, I'm like, dude, you got to pull these ones out. These are those games that kind of slip under the radar that nobody really seems to think too much about. They think of them like a spin-off or something like that. But we're talking about good old Resident Evil Revelations, and I've got my original 3DS version right here. The
Heck
one that's
yeah.
literally, you probably can't see it on camera, but it's literally misspelled on the side.
Oh, really?
So like the very original ones, like, which makes sense. Revelations isn't the easiest word to spell. I get it, you know. And I also got my Wii U copy, which I think is just kind of a cool one.
Oh, cool. Yeah, right
You
on.
know, but it was one of those games that like I literally got it day one on the 3DS, and I was so pumped because this was like when the 3DS came out. You know, you had there's like a couple games that kind of hold you over, but nothing too much. You had Ocarina of Time, which was really cool. Don't get me wrong, but you know it's Ocarina of Time. You've owned it on many systems before, even though that version probably is the best one of them all if you were going to play it. And then I think there was Star Fox came out not too long after, but Resident Evil Revelations was kind of like the first like here's an all original game. It's going to feel like it's a console game. It's going to feel big, bad, awesome, and all kinds of stuff. And it's going to blow your mind that this actually fits on a Nintendo Game Boy at the end of the day, pretty much.
Seriously. Seriously.
And even still looking at it this day, it's like I think these graphics hold up really good. I think I saw in some reviews people were like the graphics aren't that good. Like when the PS3 version stuff came out, it's like it's a Game Boy game. What were you expecting?
Right.
like
Right.
like I love that. Like in my eyes, I'm looking at it like, damn, that's a good looking Game Boy game.
Yeah.
That's all I'm thinking of.
Yep. Yeah, and even the version that I'm playing, you know, it's like I assume it had to have had some kind of like HD, you know, remaster to it at some point or whatever post 3DS, but I mean, the fact that the game existed on that console of that era, it baffles my mind. You know, I think that more so than anything, like people complaining about the graphic side of things, like I wouldn't complain about that. What I would not even like complain about, but comment on is just the way that it's designed due to the limitations of the hardware of the time. That was the very first thing that I noticed playing this game was just like, oh, like levels are actually pretty rudimentary. They're pretty just like straight and narrow hallways and hard, you know, like hard angles, you know, left and right, you know, and 90-degree corners and things like that. You don't have like a ton of distance per se, you know, things that I've seen of that. But, you know, just like I said, just right off the bat, playing it at the very first time in 2025, like my first reaction to it was like, oh, this feels like Resident Evil 5 mobile, more or less, you know, like that's kind of what it feels like, you know. So from a new player perspective, just right off the get-go, you know, I think that's definitely my first reaction to it.
Yeah, because well, I mean, it's 2012 is when the 3DS version, and then of course there is the ones that come out on console. So pretty much any version you play that's not 3DS version, whether that be PlayStation, Xbox, Nintendo Switch, and so on, those ones are all like, you know, they're remastered, but I don't think it's like beyond just, you know, making it look, you know, 1080 and all that
like
kind of
up-res,
stuff.
yep.
Yeah, up-res. I think there's a little bit of texture and lighting probably added in there and so on like that. And I also think there's more to the raid mode. I think that's about kind of it. Maybe a couple extra like novelty items add in. But for the most part, that 3DS version was kind of all the stuff that you saw in the game. It was all jam-packed in there.
Yeah.
And of course, the 3DS version, it is a very cool one. Like, it's one of those ones like, you know, it's not like I would say like the other ones kind of replace or anything like that. They do a good job of kind of like still keeping it in there. But like, you know, on the 3DS version, not only did you get like, you got the dual screens, which I remember one of the best parts about this goes with the DS, 3DS, and even Wii U was having the two screens was always that you always had the map always up. Like that's something that like you take for granted. I remember one of the biggest ones was there was the Castlevania games that came out for DS. And I always just thought about, you know, you play Symphony of the Night on PlayStation 1, and it's like, I don't know how many times, I wish they had a counter that told me how many times I pressed select in that game to look at the map. Because you probably pressed it like 10,000 times throughout it. And the whole point is like, when you got the map down below, you're just like, cool, you can keep walking, look down at the map, keep going. Oh, okay, I gotta go that room there. And Resident Evil Revelations utilizes that feature. Now, granted, in the versions we played, because I played it on Switch and you played it on Steam, it's always sitting there in like the top right corner, which is really cool because it's like there's something so nice about like you don't have to stop and press select 10,000 times, you can always just see it up there and so on like that. Yep. And kind of know and like chart your course that way without having to be like, okay, pause. I mean, even when we're playing Conscript, that was one of those games too where look at the map, go back, look at the map, go back. You do that so many times.
Oh yeah. And finally, first game in what, 3 games now where I didn't have a map problem at all this time. It's like it was just there. And it was awesome.
Yeah, just the map there, it worked and all that stuff. So little other bonus features I'm just going to kind of say from like when playing it on the 3DS that I thought was kind of neat too back is not only that, you also had, because the 3DS, you had the touchscreen at the bottom, so you had like your weapons and stuff like that. You could literally, if you want to, I was always like, ooh, touch a screen? Like, what are you guys, crazy? Like, you're not supposed to do that. I grew up in like the 80s and 90s. It was blasphemy. Like, that was a time period where you get your hand chopped off for touching like the screen at like someone's house. We're like, that's a $3,000 unit. Don't you dare touch that. So that's always stuck with me. But like, you could switch the guns that way. I almost want to say that like in the original version, because the initial 3DS didn't have the second joystick. And they made this like attachment thing called like the Circle Pad Pro or something.
Right.
And this was the first game to utilize it, or at least the first game for the U.S. And so there might have been some weird Japanese one, but this was kind of one. It was this game and Metal Gear Solid 3 3DS version, which I've always still wanted to get that one because I bet you there's some neat stuff about playing it.
I can imagine. See, I never had the 3DS, so like I mean, granted, yes, this did come out like on consoles later, but I just straight up missed this, So I was actually really curious to find out like. So here recently, I just bought my son a DS, just a regular ass, just red DS. And I was like thinking about it and I was like, I would hope anyways that the 3DS has at least, like it has to have 2 sticks for this game to work right. Because otherwise I'm thinking like, if it's just a directional pad, up, down, left, right, and you can have omnidirectional with that, but like, are you moving like with your actual like, stylus like on the screen? Like, I thought that's how you were like having to move around it. And then I was like, well, how do you fire? How do you do all these things in the game? So that makes more sense. I've never played on a 3DS before. I've like literally have never held one.
Well, as I said, the controls you mentioned there, that's how Metroid Prime plays in a lot of the first-person shooters. So, like, you would, like, on the original DS, you would hold it with, like, your left hand, and then you would be on the D-pad, would be, like, your strafe. It'd be, like, your arrow key or your, WASD, and then you would use the stylus to aim like a mouse. And it was actually, it's as weird as it sounds, it actually is pretty darn accurate. And then I remember on that game, I think you shoot with L, and then I think you could double tap to jump is how it worked. But when I played it on 3DS, because I only had the regular 3DS, I didn't get the Pro adapter thing. Eventually, I got what they call is the new 3DS, But the new 3DS is the one that has the beefier. It just sounds stupid because it just makes me feel like, oh, new 3DS. I'm like, well, don't you already have a 3DS? I'm like, yeah, but this one's new.
Yeah, it's new.
But that one's the one that's like, if you ever do get a 3DS, I recommend, this probably costs the most out of all of them, but you get the new 3DS XL because that one has the joysticks and the extra buttons put in there. The 3D actually looks legitimately good on it because on the initial 3DS, you kind of would turn the 3D on and go, cool, and maybe during a cutscene or something like that. But then once the gameplay came, it's like, forget about that. That's not going to work. But on the new 3DS, you can legitimately kind of play the games in 3D, and they actually look pretty darn decent.
Interesting.
The process is a little bit fast. There's a couple little, like it actually was kind of like a pro version of it. Which does make for this game pretty cool. But when I played it originally on the 3DS, I just played it like Resident Evil 4 style controls at that period. So, now I actually played it with the controls that they kind of had, and I really like the controls where, it's kind of, I guess, it's like Resident Evil 6 is the best way to sort of say it, but like, it plays like, in a sense, I guess you would say a somewhat modern shooter. I guess no different than like Resident Evil 2 and 3 and 4 remake does, where it's kind of like halfway between Resident Evil 4, but then you still have twin stick action and so on like that.
Yeah. It reminded me, like in gameplay, it reminded me exactly of what we just played through, and that's Resident Evil 5. Because I use the more modern control scheme in Resident Evil 5, as compared to the original, and it felt just like that, where it's like you can tell like the game is really fighting against it. It really doesn't want you to play that way, but somehow they shoehorned it in. Your character movement's a little janky, but I mean it works. It totally works, and it's fine. The game actually plays really well. That was probably the more impressive thing about the game for me in general, was just the way of like just how streamlined and smooth and just like how everything worked except for that one final boss, like thing that we talked about that we'll get to.
Yeah, we'll get to there because that one is a little bit of a cluster. But no, I think the controls in this one are actually really smooth and really dialed in. And I ended up picking this game on the Switch because I heard they had gyro controls on it. I'm like, ooh, that could be kind of cool because Resident Evil 4 on the Wii is like one of my all-time favorite ones. And technically the Quest one is almost like Resident Evil 4, just even more extreme. Yeah. But I was kind of like, oh, that'd be cool to have that little bit. Because I take that back. The 3DS had that too, if you really wanted to. Because that was the one where you could just slightly move the console ever so slightly, so you could have real precise aiming. So you'd be aiming, and then you just move it up a fraction, boom, and then it was like, oh, that's a cool feature. The Wii U had that as well. Because the Wii U kind of kept all the features if you disinclude the 3D or the 3D part. It had all the features of the 3DS. So technically, the Wii U is probably the second best version to play, if not maybe the best version, because you can still get a lot more of those other features in there that you won't get necessarily on the other consoles. Not like you're missing out on much, but just little things. But this is the only downfall, is being an old school gamer who still plays in inverted controls. You get one or the other, So either the joystick's either going to be inverted or the gyro is going to be inversion, but gyro inversion's kind of weird. In life, I don't think I've ever, I like inversion makes sense to me from, flying a plane in a video game. That's where that all came from. But the idea of inversion with a gun is a really strange concept. Yeah. So it was kind of a bummer because I was looking forward to playing it with that, and I was like, you could see where it was kind of cool and so on like that. And if I didn't have that inversion issue, it probably would have worked because you combine the joystick and that together, and if they're all in sync, it's like, ooh, that would have been kind of fun. But lo and behold, I just had to play it, standard style.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, I same as always, just played with PS5 controller over Bluetooth, linked up via Steam. But I will comment, the mouse and keyboard controls are actually very solid. I was actually really impressed. I was really impressed with it. It actually helped me in a couple areas where I was able to switch to that control scheme for combat encounters and some of the more hectic ones that come up throughout the game. Moving over to mouse and keyboard and having that kind of control to just click heads instead of using a stick, so that actually helped. But yeah, no, it actually works very well. But I'd argue most Resident Evils play very well with mouse and keyboard, at least the more modern ones, the over the shoulder ones, for sure.
Yeah, it's because the aiming and everything like that's so perfect, and that's technically why the Wii version and even on the 3DS with the gyroscope, why that all is cool, because it just gives you that extra bit of little bit of dialing it in that the joystick just never will have that properly, where you can just pinpoint in a shot. Still to this day, the one thing I really want, and I don't know why nobody's really made anything, and I've looked kind of hard, I found some stuff that's close but no cigar, is something that, can I have a controller in one hand? And I always reference the nunchuck on the Wii. Give me one of those, but with maybe 5 more extra buttons or something like that. And then I'll use the mouse in my right hand. That would be the ultimate one for me, is just slice like an Xbox controller down the side, and just give me kind of this claw grip thing that is and then have the mouse. I would love to have that. And as I said, I've tried it. I found a couple things that were close. I have this one really weird PC controller, which has one of those touch pads, almost like the Steam thing kind of had for its brief time. Yeah. Which I wish I so want one of those controllers, but they're so expensive now, $200 used. Yep, that one right there. Damn.
I was gonna say, I just found it. It was sitting in my drawer.
Yeah, that was one of those ones. I remember I didn't at first. I was like, I'll think about it. And then when I wanted to get one, it's we discontinued it. I was like, what? No.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I was like that. But so it has
really bad about all of that, except for this, Steam Deck now, but.
Yeah. Anyway. So this one has that, but it's obviously it's a controller made by somebody who's probably never played a control or never used a controller in their life. So everything's it's designed like almost like a mouse and keyboard. So it's kind of reverse control stuff. I'm yeah, but if I'm holding a controller, you got to don't make L2 shoot or whatever the heck it is now, it's a left mouse button. That's weird as all can be.
Yep.
And granted, you could sit there and you could mess with the control, but I'm I don't want to do that for every single game. You know what I mean?
Well, look at what I mean. Not to go too far off topic, but I mean literally Switch 2. I mean, they're literally doing that. They're allowing you to have a mouse in your right hand and control stick in your left hand and be able to play games that way. Amazing, awesome. Because I'm very much the same.
That actually might be the control scheme I've always been looking for, is the Switch 2. I literally did not put two and two together. I'm like, oh yeah, they have mouse mode in there.
Yeah.
Because if you have the mouse and then you have, because that controller would be perfect for one hand, and then you would, I mean, you'd have enough buttons because you would have, well, you'd have three shoulder buttons now, and then you'd have joystick, clickable joystick, and then the D-pad. So then,
Yeah.
that you could do quite a bit with that,
Yeah, I'd imagine so. So
if you could plug a keyboard in too, you'd have all the extra buttons.
yeah, exactly.
So but yeah, control wise, I know we'd like delved onto that on the Resident Evil, but it's always an important one when you got some really good controls. Just overall of this game, this was also the game that I used to always tell people, because there was a time period that still exists where people would be like, oh, Resident Evil is just all action anymore, blah, 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 it's not the same. And I used to go like, dude, have you played Revelations? It is literally the game that will give you the classic survival horror vibes, yet still combined with the Resident Evil 5 and 6 gameplay. Because I think this game came out the same year as Resident Evil 6. Technically, 6 is like November and this is like January or something like that. But it's like this game to me felt like this was like the go-to survival horror. It's like if you were looking for a survival horror game, this is the one. This one kind of delivers like those notions to you, yet still keeps that good, smooth gameplay of Resident Evil 5.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, like comparatively to Resident Evil, like coming off of Resident Evil 5 and then playing this, like they feel similar in the sense of like their gunplay and like the ever progressing, like just streamlined nature of it. But this game has more puzzles. It has more locked doors. It has more keys. It has more key items just in general. I think the tone is like way more deep and heavy comparatively to like Resident Evil 5, where like the tone in that game was just more war torn than anything. It was just like it was the Metal Gear of 4, like basically like that's just basically what it felt like. But no, this game in general, I think like really nails more of the survival horror tone while still maintaining like the gameplay elements of this era of Resident Evil of like 2009 to like 2012 or so.
Yeah, because I always kind of call there's three eras of Resident Evil I mostly think about. Kind of, you can almost say maybe four nowadays, but the classic one, which I always think is generally the games of 0 through Code Veronica. That's the all that, and then I feel there's sort of like the mid era, which is Resident Evil 4 through 6, including Revelations 1 and 2. And then the new era being 7 and 8. And then you could say the remakes 2, 3, and 4, but 2, 3, and 4 are almost kind of different than 7 and 8, so they're almost two slightly separate ones on two different paths. Yeah. But this one here I feel kind of mixes the best of both for that, and just one of those ones where I feel like the horror elements are there, you get enough puzzle and everything like that. Nothing's too ridiculously like challenging the puzzles, or you never get too lost. I feel like it's just enough to keep the fun level high, but without ever getting to the point being like, dude, where do I need to go next?
Right. Right. Yeah, there's really like not. I don't know. I think my comments from the very start of this episode about like it feels like a DS game, like just straight up, like it feels like it was. And I'm not going to use the terms of like dumbed down or like rudimentary versions or whatever. Like it was designed for a DS. And I love the way that they did their episodic, side of this, because like one, when you think about, like a handheld device, are you going to want to sit there and play on a DS for 3, 4, 5 hours in a row? Maybe some people for sure, but arguably,
I'm pretty sure that's what I did when this game came out. I want to say I beat this game in 2 nights.
Really? Okay. So,
and I remember it was cool because I plugged my headphones in. I was like sitting in the dark with it and everything. Like that was getting the real experience. But But yeah, it's designed in that episode way so that you can do everything in like 30-minute chunks, give or take.
Because it very much felt like. Because at this era, I was playing stuff like The Walking Dead, the Telltale series and whatnot. That was all coming out in episodes. I remember a bunch of games of this era starting to come out in episodes, and I'm glad that this one, like, even though it launches a full title, that's the only thing that really confused me about episodic side of this was like, because it launched as a full title with all 12 chapters, it's like, why is this previously on Resident Evil, like per episode and whatnot. It was a little confusing, but I do enjoy that it was like set up in digestible chunks like that, because one, for me, because this was my first Let's Play on my channel, you know, that I was able to do. And it was the perfect format for it, because it's like, cool, I can play for 30 to 40 minutes, you know, get an episode completed, finish recording it, do some slight editing, and then, you know, just upload it to your channel. It all makes sense because of the console that this comes from, you know. So
yeah, and speaking of which, if anybody decides they want to take a little gander at our Let's Plays, because we each did one playing through this game here, as I'll put a little link to our playlist so you can see our whole journey through the games as well too. But and I think really it was just like, you know, because there was all those other games coming out like on consoles with like the episode thing, and I think it was that one that, you know, because it was on a handle, that's like, yeah, just think about it. It's like, yeah, you pick it up, you play a little bit here and there, and maybe you don't get back around to it till a couple days later. So that's why we give you that previously on. And I feel like that's, they kind of said it was like, it was gonna be one of those games you just pick up here and there and you progress through it that way.
Yeah.
Instead of just blasting through it like, you know, a standard Resident Evil, though I'm not saying you couldn't do that.
Yeah.
I remember, because that was fine, because I remember when they did Revelations 2 and then they sold those ones individually as like 4 different episodes, and it was like, I hate to start saying, but it's like, dude, that's what you do if you're an indie company and you can't afford to put the full game out at once.
Oh, sure,
I feel like you're Capcom. Put the full game out. Like, you know what I mean? There's no excuses. You know? Nowadays, if I think back on that in hindsight, I kind of go, okay, I see what they were just trying something. It was kind of an interesting idea, you know. But I just remember at that point, I'm like, oh, I'll just wait till you get your game all said and done, which was only like a month later or something like that it came out on disc. But I did think that was kind of a weird one, but they were just being experimental and so on like that.
Yeah. I don't see it as a problem whatsoever, because again, like, I mean, for this type of console, like it totally makes sense to me to be even just like designed this way from the get-go. You know, let's make really action-packed, you know, with some like horror elements here and there. Let's pack in a little bit of puzzle, a little bit of, you know, like exploration and whatnot into these bite-sized chunks to where a player can sit down for 30 minutes, complete it, you know, come back the next day, and on the next episode they'll be able to like recap what happened, and, you know, like, and keep the player engaged. I think it was all very, very well done throughout its entire playthrough, you know, like the whole run of it. So
well, and I think that, like, I like the way that it goes about it, because the storytelling way is kind of neat. It sort of plays out like, almost reminds me like episode of like 24 in a sense, because even though it's got the survival horrorness and all that kind of stuff going there is a lot of that kind of like almost like government conspiracies and what's going on here and who can you trust, you know what I mean? It has this back and forth. Once again, we're still in kind of a post Metal Gear era where everybody kind of implements a little bit of that in there, but it really reminds me of almost that kind of TV show style where each thing's kind of there and you're going to see like, oh, now let's see it from another character's perspective and see how it's all lining up and so on. Because the cool thing is I felt like, you know, your main character is Jill Valentine, and I almost felt like they sort of put this game out to sort of redeem it a little bit from Resident Evil 5, if anybody was kind of like bummed out that she was being used by Wesker and as a villain and all that kind of stuff. They're like, you know what, here you go. Here's the Jill Valentine. She'll be the main character. You could play as her. You know, she's going to be all in classic form and so on like that. You know, so it's Jill Valentine, and then she's got a new partner because it's Resident Evil. You always got to have, God forbid anybody works with the same person twice.
Yeah, seriously.
That's always been my biggest complaint to like Resident Evil. Not saying I don't like I like Parker. Parker's a cool character. Yeah. You know what I mean? But it's that one. It's like in every Resident Evil, it's like, well, she has a partner. She's had a partner since 1995 or 6.
Right.
Like why do they always have to keep splitting up?
Right.
So on like that. Same with Leon and everything too. But whatever. You know, her and Parker, you know, are here investigating this on a ship to kind of figure out what the heck this bioterror is going on here. And the idea that it's on a ship, a cool, like old school looking cruise liner, I think that's a great setting. Very eerie. I know Gun Survivor 2, or might be, is it Gun Survivor 2? Yeah, no, Gun Survivor 3, take that back. Resident Evil Dead Aim also takes place on a ship too. But I think that's always a very neat setting. You know, you're trapped on a boat, so you know you can't go anywhere, you know, and you got this old, it's almost designed like 1930s, like post-Titanic kind of look to it. You find out later in like a forum that like, no, this was just built to look old, which is like kind of a strange notion. Exactly. And for some reason it was built by what's his name? George Trevor of you know, Resident Evil 1 with his daughter Lisa Trevor and so on like that. So somehow, some way he's all involved with that. But so yeah, you got this cool like investigation. The setting's neat. It's nice and eerie and so on like that. And yeah, as you said, I do think that like Parker's a cool character too, as her kind of like new kind of co-host guy. He kind of has a mixed match kind of Barry feel of like slightly older guy. I like how they make him just kind of, slightly kind of like husky and everything like that.
Oh yeah.
And you're part of the BSAA along, with Chris Redfield and so on like that, which you learn Chris is here later on too, just doing his own section of the story.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, to be blatantly honest, like in as much as I've gone back and rewatched like all of the cutscenes and trying to wrap my head around this story, this is another one that just really got past me. They're fun individually, like each episode like has like a really cool, like, heart pumping, like, yeah, let's get this going, like type plot, to it or whatever. But I think like the totality of like what this story is trying to say, I really don't understand it. And I think like right off the get-go, it's like we have this I don't know, like this society that's like, very much into like harnessing the power of the sun and solar energy, and they're like very clean, society and like very clean energy and blah blah blah, and just like these terrorists just hate them because and like that's really all I get out of it. Like, did you ever understand like the reason why did these terrorists attack this like beautiful like free society basically?
Yeah, so it's a definite like clustery like wraparound thing that kind of comes back and forth and just is kind of playing through it again and then doing a couple runs and everything like that. So Terra Grigia is this little island that they've literally made in the Mediterranean Ocean. Like it's a full on like, here's our kind of like oasis that we'll have, and we'll live off clean energy, and probably just was a bunch of rich people like, we'll just get away from the riffraff of the world and everything like that. So don't worry about us. We got our clean city out here away from you heathens. Yeah. So they're out there floating around and so on like that. And at first you just kind of learn there's just a terrorist group that's like doesn't like the idea of these people living clean and so on like that. Probably work for the oil companies or something.
Yeah, exactly.
And so they're like, hey, you know what we're gonna do? We're just gonna release some bioterror on you guys and take your nice city and throw a bunch of hunters on there and just have them run around. And there's apparently other stuff they throw, but you only really see the hunters there and so on like that. They're supposedly infected them with that like. It's got T-virus something that creates the water like monster kind of things that you see in the game. And so they just totally like just release this on this town. There's just chaos ensues and so on like that. And you see this told through a couple of flashbacks where you get to play as Parker. You go through there trying to like save people out of the building and whatnot as like hunters are breaking in and so on. But so they decide, you know what? You know how you fix a problem. We put all this money into here, but now we got a bunch of hunters running around. We're never going to get the real estate back. Just hammer a dawn this thing.
Right.
Pull that hammer of dawn that's sitting there waiting for Dino Crisis 2.
Yeah, seriously.
Blow the living daylights out of this town.
It's such a recurring. I don't know. I'm actually curious to see like how many future episodes we come back across like another Hammer of Dawn situation, because this is the second one.
Yeah. So they like just fry this town. This Hammer of Dawn doesn't like just blow a hole like in like the Giganosaurus Rex or anything. This thing just fries everything on there and just burns everything up. But what I kind of learned from the story is in a short way getting around, because it kind of leads to the end, is there's this one older dude with a beard. I'm trying to see if I remember what that dude's name was. That he's kind of like the main guy you see sort of in charge. You just think he's like the boss of you and everything like that. Who was he again? He was it Raymond Vester? I can't remember. No, Raymond's the
Raymond's
dude. Maybe I don't have.
Yeah, I don't remember. I don't remember that old man's name, but he does pop around, quite often throughout the totality of all the story bits. So
what I kind of learned is the old man, and he's in charge of this group called the FBC, and of course you work for the BSAA as Jill and Chris, and so on like that. And in a weird way, and there's this terrorist group out there that they just don't like the idea of these people like these high. I think probably if I had to guess, they don't like the idea of these high and mighty people that just think they can live on their own, like Elysium out here, so on like that. Yeah. But what it really turns out to be in the long, spoilers ahead, is that the old dude, who the FBC, who seems like the main thing in charge, he actually hires this terrorist group to cause havoc on this town, to make the BSAA look bad, make the FBC look much better so he can gain more control over the bioterrorism, stuff. It has one of those weird, like, looped around things. Okay. And that's the kind of the core story. And then in time, we're told about it through Jill's adventures. The dude... I guess Clive O'Brien, who's kind of like your Colonel Campbell in this game. So you got him in there and so on like that. And then, of course, Chris. And then Chris has a new partner named Jessica, who at first you're like, who the hell is this bimbo just sitting up there? Because I'll say there's about 3 characters in this. There's like, how the hell did they get jobs here? That's the only thing you think about.
Exactly. And just like talk about like, I get it. You sexualize women in video games. I totally understand it. But she is just like, not even in the slightest like right amount of clothing to be doing what she's doing on this mission. It's like, I mean, like even in the snow area, like when you first come across like Chris and this chick, it's just like what is going on here with this character? And come to find out, she's actually an important character. Like she actually matters to the story and whatnot. Because I just wrote her off. Within the first couple missions of her following us around. I don't know, man. Like I didn't really care for her, but designed that way, like for good reason. Like she's written to be, this annoying person, and whatnot. So, but yeah, I don't know. But I did like Raymond. I think that Raymond was a cool character because Raymond's like the rookie, and Parker's like the old gruff, FBC agent, like trying to train this kid, and this kid's always like screwing up and blah, blah, blah. And he's trying to play like kind of like a father, like dad-ish type character is kind of what I started to gather towards the end there and whatnot. So there are good characters. And like I said, I think like if you take each individual episode of this game and like just keep it in its own vacuum, like I think it's all very good, like within that. But I think like the totality of like what this game's trying to tell, I was like, okay.
Yeah, well, it's that one where they're definitely trying to make it way more complicated than it probably needs to be for a Resident Evil story, And as I said, I still think it's fun, and just the way that they go about telling the story really works. I will say it's like even if you get kind of lost, you're still like engaged. It's like that's kind of like how it is, But yeah, they got some other. And there's 2 other interesting characters, which I always look at them like the only way these 2 guys got a job is they must be like the nephews or something of like that to like Clive O'Brien, because it's almost like he's got these 2 like dumb like kids. It's just like, well, we just want to keep them out of jail and and so, and I just don't want them hanging out in the basement all day long,
right,
smoking weed and so on like that. So he's like, I got him a job here because it's like the weirdest, and I know it's like. For some reason, I remember them being almost more obnoxious back in the day. Like they weren't as bad as I thought, because I kind of gave you like a heads up. There's 2 characters in here that might go a little bit the distance, and it's like really what it is. It's one guy's voice is, I think that's really what it is. If you had a different voice actor that wasn't giving him I talk like a real annoying voice like that, exactly. And he's got stupid lines. He's like, he's talking about Dante's Inferno. What the? Oh, we got to go to the cold. Oh, that sounds terrible, Uncle. Gosh darn it, can't we have a better assignment than this? My name's Jackass. Of all things, just we know you are a jackass. And then the other guy. By himself probably wouldn't seem that bad, but the second that you just team up with it, it's just like you got this guy's like, yo, I'm just kind of like whatever, I'm just here, I got my kind of hip clothes on, and I got hip hop music that plays whenever I show up on the scene. They just remind me of 2 guys that they literally only got a job because they had a family member here.
100%.
And so on like that.
Both of them. Because I think you only play as them at like a handful of times. I think it's like probably
2 missions, I think.
Like 2 to 3 missions, something like that. And those easily could have just been cut, and I don't think like anything would have changed, like story wise. They have cool set pieces, and that's the one thing that I will give this game absolute credit for is like the set pieces in this game, and the way that it tells its stories surrounding those set pieces is so well done. Like I love that there's like a core thing that happens, and you see it from Jill's point of view, and you see it from Chris's point of view, and you see it from like in all these different episodes, and everything's like rounding itself out. I think it's super well done. I love that aspect of this game, and I think it's probably its best core feature for me. Is like that alone, just like this multi, view of individualized stories and whatnot. I think it was really well done.
Yeah, no, I think that's kind of it, because it's like you change locales and all that kind of stuff too. You got the boat, you got like the Arctic areas. There's some of the stuff where you're kind of just on land kind of prior, plus the, it's 1 year back in time. You're in Terra Grigia, so you're in like the cityscape and so on like that. So it actually changes up quite a bit too. And once again, even those two characters, it's like, it's kind of dumb as they are. Like, you kind of have a couple scenes where, one guy's the computer hacker kind of nerd, and then the other guy, I don't know. He's got cool knives. Like, it's just, I said,
yeah.
They just remind me of like two guys that just like, they just hang around the office and so on like that. Everybody's like, what are these guys doing here and so on, And it's the same way I kind of feel about Jessica too, because at first you're like that. Her haircut even changes throughout the thing. So like, right. Sometimes it always takes me a moment to go, when you first play that first scene of Parker, I'm like, oh, that's Jessica who's with you. She just looks completely different. So you can't really like tell right off the bat that that's who she is.
Oh yeah.
Yep. And as I said, she's always got the femme fatale, like, high heels, and like even like when she got the wetsuit on, it's like missing one leg.
Right.
You're like, it's so bizarre. Like, I'll say this: the one thing I do like is I love the the look of just the characters in general, like Jill and Chris and all that stuff. Like, this era is like one of my favorite ways that they kind of are designed, because I like where it's got a little bit of the anime look to it still.
Yeah.
Because that's the only problem I sort of have with the RE engine, is I don't like the way the characters look necessarily. I just feel like it sounds weird, because they look good graphically wise, but they kind of strangely, it takes me sort of out of the game just a little bit, because I don't feel like it's Resident Evil. It feels like it's kind of like I'm watching somebody almost do like a Resident Evil like adaptation or something like that.
Yeah.
I wish they would have kept, because even Devil May Cry 5 has that kind of same thing too, because it uses the engine, so it feels just a little bit off. And when I play this game, and any of the Resident, even like 5 and all that stuff, I love the way that the characters, I feel like that's the way they need to look. Yeah. They all look really cool. I mean, the main characters at least. Jessica's got some goofy outfits, but whatever. Yeah. Her outfit actually, when she's in like the Terra Grigia areas, seems more normal than any of the other ones.
Yeah, exactly.
Even though she looks like she's there for work in 1952, but other than that, the Jill's outfit looks cool, just her look and just so on like that. Chris always has, a good military look and his snow gear and all that stuff. Yeah. But
no, I think everybody looks appropriate minus Jessica. I think Jessica's the only one. It's like
it's Jessica and the two nephews or whatever the hell you want to call those guys. They're just the three that feel really like out of place. And the two nephew guys, I keep calling them nephews, but that's literally what they feel like.
Yeah.
They remind me of almost like those like kind of characters that George Lucas would have loved, where here's your comic relief characters that probably nobody else is really laughing at except for the guy who put them in there.
Yep. Yeah, I think another comment that I'll throw on this is that this game was a lot more atmospherically moody than I thought, than I anticipated it to be and whatnot. There's so many cool scenes of like going down the like dark and faded, like hallway of the ship with, bloodstains on the wall and, like a light flickering in the background and whatnot. And again, it's like, it's rudimentary in terms of its like design, because everything is like just very boxy and, like just in terms of its, the way that the levels are arranged and whatnot. But the things that they put into the level, like I was watching some of my footage earlier and whatnot, and like walking past like some medical tents and bays and whatnot, and just seeing the blood covered gurneys and like things like that. It's something that Capcom has always done very, very well with their games. But here in particular, I was really excited to see that in a handheld game. Let me kick these kids out. Hold on one second.
Yeah, no worries.
Sorry about that.
They're having way too much fun back there.
Yes.
I was just watching them just face plant over and over and over.
Yeah. It'll be fun to watch back in 15 years.
Exactly.
Anyways. But yeah, no, and it really I think the one piece that really got me was the and I forgot her name. What's the female that like turns into the super scary boss that like follows you around like, or at least like the first areas?
Rachel.
Is it Rachel? Because she was like a BSAA agent or something like that, right?
Yes, because she was working with Raymond or whatever. Because
right.
So Raymond's going in there because like I guess. on this, the reason why they're going on the ship real quick, I guess, just to say why that all going down is because there was a Terra Grigia thing a year ago, and then they got kind of word that wait a second, there might be some more of that virus. We thought we got rid of that virus, but there's a boat floating out there that might be containing more of the stuff, and that's why Jill and Parker have to kind of go out there.
Okay. Yep. Yeah. Because like leading, that was probably like. It was my very first death was that Rachel, the woman or whatever, you know, like, so after she like dies in front of you and whatnot, like, or you find her body really is what happens. She mutates, you know, like into this thing that's just like, I don't even know how to describe it. It's disgusting is what it is, you know, and like the way that she moves and articulates and whatnot. But I think that's just BOWs in general in this game. So anyways, just talking about like tone and atmosphere and like its general level design leading into that was just like, it was so cool, you know, to see. I love the scene of, you know, like Jill trying to find Chris, you know, is just pretty much like the totality of like the first chapter or whatever. And like, remember when you like walk past that one doorway and you like kind of see like Chris's like shoulders, like the big dude, you know, just like sitting in the chair or whatever. And then you have to go through this like rigmarole of like finding the key to open up that cell where you see Chris and blah, blah, blah. And then you walk in there and then you realize that like, oh no, it's a dummy and the head falls off of it or whatever, you know? And then like Jill's like, oh my God, blah, blah. Like, it's just like silly things like that, you know, I thought was super fun, you know?
Well, and the interesting thing too is because in that same place where you go to find the key at is that's where you first find Rachel's body early on, and she's just there. She's just brutally like murdered on the side there. But you can tell the character's way too designed to be like something. It's not just like a soldier or something like that, like a throwaway. It's like, oh, obviously this is going to be something. You know, she's got an outfit she probably borrowed from Jessica.
Yeah, 100%.
You know, so you know that probably's coming back. One thing I thought was kind of interesting because just in playing through it just kind of twice in a row is I noticed if you're Jill and you go to talk to that door, she'll go in there and go, oh, I think that's Chris in there. I guess I got to find the key. If you don't go that door and you actually forget about it and you go the other way around, Parker will call up and go, hey, I think I found Chris. You got to come take a look at this door. I'm like, oh, that's kind of cool.
Okay.
And I think there's a couple moments like that. Like if you go to there kind of like either first, you know, Jill will kind of say it, but if it's the other way around, Parker will kind of fill you in to let you know, which I think is kind of neat how there's a little bit of that there.
Yeah. Yep. And then from there, like I'm trying to remember like kind of like what the missions really were. Because like initially, like I said, it's you know, Jill and Parker are just trying to find Chris, and do they even know about Jessica at that point, or we're just trying to find Chris? I don't even remember.
They don't know that Jessica's a turncoat yet. At the moment, you know, because Jessica's there. Obviously, she works at the BSS or BSAA back in Terra Grigia a year before. So Parker, Raymond, Jessica are all involved. They're all sent there, you know, when everything's kind of going down.
Yeah.
To kind of rescue people and do whatever they can. You know, so at the moment it's just Jessica. You just kind of see her there of Chris, and you don't think much of it. She's just a weird partner who, for some reason, is just way too scantily dressed to be on these missions.
Yeah.
Flirts a little too much with Chris.
Yeah,
and she's like, and then she always gets that thing. Well, what about Jill? Like, hey, Jill's my partner.
Yeah.
You don't get a second partner in life. Not someone like Jill. Nope. Yep. That's all that matters.
Yep.
Like I just love how Chris is like totally just like it's like she gets close to him and just like. Back away.
Yep. Stay back.
I'm a one woman man.
Yeah, exactly. And there's so much like leading into that too. Like this whole like, I don't know. Jessica obviously wants Chris. Chris wants nothing to do with her. All he cares about is Jill and like just making sure that Jill's okay and this, that, and the other. And I don't even think like there's like a, you know, like love relationship between Jill and Chris like whatsoever, you know, and it's so heavily implied, you know. There's actually one comment between Parker and Jessica regarding that or whatever, and that Parker says something to the effect of like, well, you know, Jessica, maybe he already has somebody in mind or something like that, you know. And it's like, again, why in this weird plot that we're already in this, you know, in this game of like being on this ship in the middle of the ocean fighting BOWs and stuff, and there's like now there's sexual tension going on, and it's like, why?
yeah, she's making weird comments and so on like that. Yeah,
it's just,
and I think that's just because she's designed in almost like a old school like femme fatale thing.
Oh yeah.
You know, I always think of what's her name from Lupin the Third, Fujiko or whatever. Like that. Like I feel like she's really designed like that because that always seems like the biggest archetype that you can think about. Like in anything Japanese is they want to make her like that. And so she's kind of got that going on there. While once again, Chris only cares about the mission and so on like that. You know. Yep. So there's that going on. But,
so in this is post 5, correct?
No, this is pre-5. So this is
okay.
Between
so we haven't
4 and 5.
Oh, okay, so we haven't even been punching boulders or nothing yet. All right.
So because if you were we didn't play the DLC on 5, but there's right when you get to about like right before you get to the credits of Revelations, and it kind of does the thing where it says what all the characters kind of happen to them, and then it shows Jill and Chris. They're literally running to the DLC mission of 5, which is the prequel to the regular game. So they show some of that stuff, when it shows Jill and Chris in the mansion. And, of course, Jill falls out the window. Chris reaches out and everything like that. So, so this one takes place there. Because I couldn't remember at first when we were playing this game. I'm like, does this one take place between 4 and 5 or is it 5 and 6? You know?
Okay, because that makes more sense, too. Because, like, the other piece I was thinking about was just Jill in general. Like, because if this was post 5, I was like, she's been like mind controlled by Wesker for like a minute now, and whatnot, and had the like jewel on her chest and all that, from 5.
Maybe the old scar would be there since she has her like jacket down a little bit, and
to go into this plot, I was like, it doesn't make sense. Like that, it almost feels like, I don't know, because this is canonical, correct? Like per Capcom, like this is a canonical series. Okay, so because it was the only thing I was thinking like at the time, not realizing that this was set pre-5, how this was fitting into the story in general, just because of like the little amount that I do know about Resident Evil stuff, like this one was really confusing me. Now that makes more sense. Okay, so
yeah, well, it's the weird one too. And since you mentioned that, I'm like, I guess Jill actually has not appeared in a Resident Evil game past this point. It's really weird to think about it, but this is I mean, other than 5 for her being in it for like the DLC or whatever, and of course, being controlled by Wesker, this is the last main game with Jill in it. That's really weird to think about. We've had like, just including remakes, we've had like 4 more games past this point, and she hasn't been in any of them. Yeah.
Right. I heard I heard a rumor about RE9 might have the return of Jill. So, but
that'd be that's always my thing. Is that I know I've brought this up every time we ever talk about Resident Evil, but it's like the thing is they always got to keep creating new characters, and it's like, dude, you have so many good characters that have already been established that don't even get enough screen time. Like Rebecca never gets to come back. It's even just our main characters like Jill, Claire, Leon, and Chris. Like, you could just have games with them in it for the rest of the time. I really would be totally fine if that was the case. Yep. Throw in a Barry here and there. Throw in some Rebecca. Throw Billy in there. I like Billy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But you throw Parker in there too, since he keeps surviving in this game. There's so many of them, but it's like they never like to reuse characters very much, and I always think that's the strangest thing. Carlos never reappears.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, maybe they'll have like a Smash Ultimate eventually, where it'll just be like, like just Resident Evil Ultimate, everybody's back. But
that's kind of what the Mercenaries United kind of is. I mean, it doesn't have everybody in it, but that's why I think I'm always kind of surprised. Now, they made this Mercenaries game for the 3DS before this game came out. It was it was kind of just like a testing zone to see like how well everything would run, and they could kind of play with it on there. And it's kind of a cool one. It's literally like having the Resident Evil Mercenaries on 5, but just handheld, and it has a couple other little extra things in there. And I think at that time period you could play as Rebecca before the DLC. I could be making that up, but there was a couple other little things in there. It was kind of neat, but I'm always kind of surprised they never just released a straight up just Mercenaries game where it's just like it takes place across all the Resident Evil games, so you have levels from every single one. You can play as all the greatest hits characters, and and so on. And I know sometimes it's always a weird one when you have a multiplayer only type game. There's always that thing of like people they've always have been. It's like, well, it's only got multiplayer in it. And then it seems to like never do nearly as good, even though we all know that not as many people play the single player stuff, especially according to like when you see the achievement pop up in certain games. But I always thought that'd be kind of cool. It's just like, have one where it's like it's got levels from all the games.
Oh, that'd be amazing.
0, 1, Code Veronica, 4, 5, 6, yada yada yada. They're all in there. But you just don't see that very much. But You know, that would be a cool way to bring a lot of characters back, at least.
Oh yeah, oh yeah, yeah. No, I very much agree. Actually, that would be actually a lot of fun. But one piece that we forgot to mention about this game was, and I remember your. I'm pretty sure it was you on my YouTube video. You commented about like gotta scan everything. The fucking scanner in this game, dude. Like, so
somebody played a lot of Metroid Prime. That's all I have to say.
Yeah, I mean, like. What does it really do? I didn't quite understand, other than like you can find health, you can find ammo. Is that literally it? Like, because you scan the bodies that you kill, you know, like they reduce down to like this like goopiness on the ground, and then you can scan it, and then you get some like points or whatever. Is that just building towards just regaining herbs, more or less, you know, health?
So what that does is you scan the bodies and it builds a percentage up, and then when you get to 100%, you pretty much just get a new herb. And whatever Clive or whatever explains it. He's like, yeah, so if you scan the bodies, we can just get more. You know, it's like we get more details on the virus and all this kind. Like you're doing research and so on for them, and then you get sort of a reward for getting enough research. Like that's kind of what it is. And then, of course, you can scan in the room. There's always, like, some random little items. So you'll find ammo or health or a grenade or something like that. Sometimes parts for your guns and everything. But, yeah, I got kind of mixed feelings about it. It's the same way I feel in Metroid Prime where, you know, the downfall to when you have the scanning thing, it's cool when you can scan stuff. Like, you know, in Metroid Prime, you could scan things and be like, cool, it tells you about, like, this and that. And so, like, and it's kind of neat. But when you know that the game wants you to have to scan everything for either achievement or points or what items and all that kind of stuff, then next thing you know, every single room you're in there, you're like, scan. Oh, there's that little... I'm glad they do have the icon in there, because that'd be really annoying if there wasn't an icon that told you if there's an item or not, because then you'd have to really scan the rooms.
Yeah.
But, yeah, sometimes I feel like it could kind of take you out of the game a bit. It's one of those ones that you almost have to do it, because that's how you're going to get extra ammo and grenades and all that kind of stuff. If you don't do it, you good luck, because that's like how you generally actually pick up ammo is from scanning stuff.
Yep.
So you kind of have to, but at the same time, I feel it's a little bit of a distraction. And it's the same way I feel in Metroid Prime. Metroid Prime, because the game wants you to scan everything.
Yeah.
You know, and I think there was a comment made once that said that people in Japan love scanning stuff. People in the US, not so much. Like it's one of those weird Japanese things that they're like, oh, they love the. I don't know if it just traces back to the ye olden days of like, you know, being the photographers at like a theme or at like a national park or something like that.
Yeah.
You know, like the stereotypical. Like, oh, it's the Japanese photographers out there and all their cameras. I bet you it's something just like that. And I think that's why they probably love doing it in games. Yep. But as I said, it gives you items, so it's cool, but it's a feature that I would almost rather just have the items just sitting there, just whatever. And I just go pick them up.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I landed with it too. It's like, it's cool, like in the first mission, like when you're on the beach, you know, and there's like all these like blobs of just random crap around and whatnot. I was fully anticipating like, oh, if I scan this thing enough, like I'm going to get 100% and it's going to give me a new, like, you know, journal entry or something, you know, like something to learn about these things and whatnot. And it's like, no, it just gave me a pill, you know? And I was like, really? like that's it. And I used it for, you know, probably the first 5-6 you know chapters or whatever, and then I just kind of dropped the feature. Like I just kind of forgot about it. And really, like I wish I would have remembered more about it, or if it would have been more exciting to allow me to use the feature more often, would have been cool. Because like there was multiple times like later on where, you know, I was out of health and ammo and things like that, but I just like wasn't thinking about the scan feature, you know. So like it was prevalent enough in the early portion of it to where it could have been interesting, but I really feel like they fumbled the ball over the totality of this game's length, which isn't very long in general. You know, it's, you know, 5-6 hours like at most, you know. But I just wish that feature would have had something a little bit more to it, you know. Like I wish I could have, like I said, even in the sense of just learning more about the BOWs that you're actually scanning, you know, and whatnot. To get that little amount of research, you know, like over to your boys and they tell you about it or something over a phone call as you're moving through a level or something, you know, like just whatever. But yeah, it was, you know, it's okay. It's cool that it exists, you know, like at least it's there, but I wouldn't say it's like groundbreaking or shattering or anything, you know.
No, I
But
kind of like that idea you say because it reminds me of almost the Dino Files and Dino Crisis 2. It'd be kind of cool if like when you got to like 100%, like maybe each enemy has its own percentages, and when you get to 100% on it, yeah, it just gives you a little bit more detail, and you get a little cool little file, or or even a guy calls you or whatever. That would be kind of neat, just to have a little bit more on it and so on like that. As I said, it gives you items, so you kind of have to use it. It's like kind of the downfall, especially on your first playthrough. On your second playthrough, you can kind of get by a little bit more, but even then you still kind of want to because hey, there might be some ammo there.
Right.
But like it makes me do the thing is every single time I go in a new room, I have to pull the scanner up. Is there a yellow light? Okay, look around. Up there we go. But then it just becomes kind of like one of those ones where you feel like you always have to do it.
Yeah.
It is kind of distracting, I will say.
Yeah.
It's literally like a mixed bag where it's like okay, you get more items, cool. But at the same time, it sort of pulls you out every single time you're in the room. It's like, it'd be kind of cool if there's almost something you unlock later on, like after you beat the game multiple times, where it just does like auto scan when you go into a room or something like that.
Sure.
Where it just speeds that up
Just
and
proximity scan or something.
and then the items just glow automatically. Yeah. Like even if you press L1 and it just goes and it just sends out like some kind of sonar wave.
Yeah. Exactly.
That's something they could have probably done for like the HD remaster. Be like, you know what, you could have streamlined there just a little bit. Just streamline that because that just feels like you totally could. Like,
yeah. Another piece that's pretty early on that I thought was pretty neat too was like so. But when is it that you first actually see the virus and like what it does? Because I just remember it being like a red liquid, and I remember there being like very specifically there was arapaima that the scientists are messing with, but I don't remember where it falls into the story. It's like remember those large fish and like those scientists are messing around with this thing and whatnot, and then they
and then of course like, you got the idiot guy like they're turning guppies into Jaws.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like all those lines. It's like I don't know why I just can't forget the lines he always has.
Yep. But I think that the actual virus in this game is really cool. I like the like just like fluid nature of it or whatever, because every time you see it, it's just a red vial, of just like this red liquid or whatever. But like one of the first things that you see of this virus that I remember anyways is those scientists, and they're messing around with these arapaima, like these large, jungle fish basically. And they introduce it to this virus, and then all of a sudden they turn into these just like monstrous fish with large teeth, and they like grow and mutate and blah blah blah. And like I think that the sci-fi side of this game was like really cool, and it's not like it's anything special. It's nothing that Resident Evil hasn't done before, but especially with 4 and 5 with the Las Plagas, and whatnot. But at least in this title, like I don't know, I felt like there was actually like more of a threat than most other RE games that I've played. Like things actually felt like, oh shit, like this whole ship is just covered in BOWs, and then inevitably what you find out about the ship later on is even more better done. I thought it was really cool. And so
well, the interesting thing too is because this game, this is one that's a little bit of a hard one to try to tell somebody the first time around. You go, well, it's a Resident Evil game, but it has no zombies. First and foremost, let me tell you that. But instead they kind of have everybody has this kind of like water monster BOW kind of infection that's going on in the ship and so on like that, and it turns these people into like weird almost. They look like the from Resident Evil 4. The what the hell's that thing called? Towards the end of the game, the really creepy thing. It starts with an R. Whatever. At the end of Resident Evil 4, with the big old silver gray monster that has the heavy breathing and of course then shoots spikes out and so on. You got to shoot him in the heart with the infrared sniper rifle and all that stuff.
Yep. I don't remember what they're called.
I can't remember. Yeah, I was gonna say Reaver, but I know that's not what it is. No. But whatever. So they kind of have a look like that in a sense, but they're just and they kind of they start with just regular looking ones, and then there's some that's got big old like saw spikes on their arms. There's the ones that shoot the little bow and arrow thing at you, and they just kind of change into different forms and so on like that. They look similar, yet there's probably about maybe 5 or 6 different models of them throughout it.
I think the best way that I can describe it, it was a thought the very first night I was playing this, is that it reminds me of like, imagine like a deflated Michelin man with rubbery bones. It's like the way that it moves. Like he's just like it's like the Michelin Man lost all of his fat, and it's just like, you know, just like really loose, scraggly skin and whatnot. But the bones are like really rubbery, and they just kind of,
yeah,
the way they move, like, oh dude, they're creepy. They're creepy as hell when they move. But
they're totally creepy, and they almost have this like, almost like, in a sense, the virus like almost inflates them with like water in a sense too,
right?
Because there's always this moisture sort of feel to it.
Mm-hmm.
Wait a second, regulator, is that what they're called? Does that sound about right?
Regular?
No, maybe it's not. At some point it will come to me, but whatever. So yeah, you have all those kind of things, and it's just, I think it's just kind of cool because it's different. You know, I know it's one of those ones that sometimes there's a little bit of a disappointment when people first play this game. Where it's like, oh, there's no zombies or anything like that. I'm like, yeah, but it's got something different in it. I think it makes it's kind of scary. They're on a boat. There's difference. Yeah. And then they throw some other stuff. There's some dogs you fight like in the Arctic and whatnot that are all mutated with like Chris and everything. And then there's hunters as well, which I think at this point you hadn't seen a hunter in a while because they weren't in 4 and 5. Yeah. So it was kind of neat to see the hunters come back. And then they got some other varieties, of course, throughout there, and so on. And interesting one, just like with some of the bosses. Like I think the first boss you fight is there's this dude who's like, you pretty much tells you like, oh, I have the key, but I went to go hide in like the pantry or whatever down in the kitchen or whatnot. Hopefully nobody finds me down there. At least I got stuff to eat. And you're like, oh, that's son of a bitch. Okay, I guess we'll go walk down there and go figure this out. And then as you get there, you just hear this like, oh. No, you're like, what are these sounds and this stuff like that and whatnot like that, and then you kind of hear Mayday, Mayday. You're like, okay, that's getting kind of weird, and of course you open this room up, and of course this big old blob guy with like a chainsaw stuck to his arm, and of course it's just the fact you learn that he just trapped himself in there, infected with this virus. And full pantry, so he ate it all. And this is one of those bosses that, like, God, when I played this, because I played this game both on like the easy and the normal mode, just like I was just kind of trying back. It's like, dude, on the normal mode, this boss is just so tough because it's like the rest of the game. I was like, okay, I'm making my way through and so on like this, no problem. But when I got to like the bosses, it's like, dude, because you got to kill them. Yeah. And they take so much ammo. Yep. Like, you know, and not only are you fighting this giant blob guy with a chainsaw on his arm and you're running around like the kitchen area and so on like that, there's a copious amount of other villains just standing around there too, just to get in your way. And I think they just keep coming too. Those other guys, there's, you know, I don't think there's any, I don't think you could kill them all and be like, cool, it's just the boss left. I think they just keep showing up. And then the other thing I think is, like, you know, you always, for the most part in this game, like maybe 90% of the time, other than a couple chapters, you seem to always have your partner with you, no matter what, kind of all a Resident Evil 5 style. But I don't think they do really much of any damage when they shoot, to tell you the truth. Like, if they do, they might do the most, like, maybe like half of what a knife attack does or something like that.
So yes and no. So going back to I forgot her name again already, but the monster chick that turns into, you know, whatever.
Oh, Rachel.
Yeah, Rachel or whatever. So I ran out of ammo in that section and was in such a panic, and you see this in my playthrough. Like, I was in such a panic, you know, like I was running away from her, trying to get, I keep calling him Barry, just trying to get Parker to shoot her, you know, and like he would be, you know, like stuck in a corner or something, like firing on her, and like she was taking damage. Absolutely, she was. Really what he was doing was like taking out the other BOWs. So I would leave a room and then, like, you know, come back into the room, and kind of similar to like our conversation in Conscript of like resetting the room. That's kind of how this works in this game too, to an extent. But coming back into the room, like the BOWs would like respawn or whatever, and I was watching him like just take them out, you know. So he would have his like large pistol thing or whatever, and usually in like 3 or 4 shots he would take out a normal BOW. But I was attempting to try to get him to take out Rachel, and like it wasn't happening. So I don't think he does that much damage, but he does enough for regular enemies. So I witnessed that a few times, especially like in the mess hall, like hunter scene or whatever, where you're fighting like a shitload of different hunters and whatnot at the same time. Same thing. Like I was running out of ammo at that point and watching him like take them out too. So he does, for sure.
Yeah, because that's the thing. I think the partners, they definitely do a little bit, but it's not a whole lot. So it's like, if you have to rely on them, good luck. You know, it's definitely a tough one. And that's the thing. It's like those boss battles, because even the Rachel one too, it's like, she takes such a good amount of ammo. I remember And it's like you just up the difficulty one more, and it's just like God, you just like I get impressed with my dodging abilities sometimes, but dodge 1 2 3 4,
Right.
1 2 3
Right.
4, shoot, dodge again, shoot, and it's just like, oh geez, and then you finally get a miss dodge, and then there you go, and now
I
she's
know.
got a hold of you.
And I'm playing on casual, dude. And there's an achievement to kill her before she gets to that final room or whatever, where you like actually have to fight her, to progress. There's an achievement on Steam for you to kill her before she gets to that room. And I'm playing on casual, and I'm dumping ammo into her, running along the way to get to that final room. There's no way, dude. Like a New Game Plus run, sure. Like I would understand that because you would have upgraded this, that, and the other and whatnot. But yeah, like on a first run, no way. There's no way.
Forget about it. Yeah. It's just, because it's like, what you gonna do? Fight her with a knife? Like, you know what I mean? Like, she is like way too tough of an enemy to do that. But yeah, that's what makes that actually really hard on those upper difficulties. Like, gosh, and it's like there's 4 difficulties too in this game. Like, and casual's like that's the one to start off with. Like, I would just say that is the one. They shouldn't really call it casual because it's not necessarily casual. I think that's like almost like normal.
Yeah.
And then normal's kind of like almost like hard in a weird way, and then the other ones are more like insane, where it's like, you like dying in one hit, go for it.
Yeah, no, because like my experience in this game in particular, just because of like, there really was no rhyme or reason for me to start in casual. I guess I just wanted an easier time, to play through this game, especially it being my very, very first ever run. Casual was totally fine. I died 4 times, I think, throughout the totality of the game, which really isn't it's not bad, like at all, like probably my worst one was in chapter 4 against Rachel, just because of like the length that it takes to get to that final room with her and whatnot, like, because you basically reset like all the way back, to like where you first like run into her. And so that inevitably made my chapter 4 last about 45 minutes as compared to probably what should have been 25, at that point, maybe like 30 minutes, at that point. So, but yeah. Cause that kind of leads me into like the next topic about like one mechanic that worked majority of the time, but not every time, is the fucking dodge. Like, why? Yeah. Is the dodge tied to a control stick movement and A, or is it just like, okay, because I don't know. Seemingly it was working sometimes where I would just hit the control stick movement without hitting A at the same time, because sometimes they would dodge, sometimes they would, and I could never really figure it out. And it was very frustrating, in some of these combat scenarios. Because especially the hunters in particular, the hunters love to just run right at you and be on top of you the entire time, so dodging is like not necessary with them. You don't have to, but in order to be proficient and not get hit continually, you should, and dodging just like didn't feel good in this game. I think they should have just made it just straight up a button itself instead of a movement, directional, and a button.
Yeah, no, you literally have to press forward and, A or X or whatever you're using and so on like that, or B if you're using a Nintendo one. And I got pretty darn good at it because I saw that, even though it says you can also dodge by pressing back and B, but I'm like, well, wouldn't that just make me do a 180 turn and just set me up for nothing good?
Right.
Like, why would it be tied to that too? But like, so I don't, if that works, maybe it does, but I never did try that. It was always forward and B. I guess the only reason I guess they do that, because if it was just B, you might end up just accidentally dodging when you just meant to run or something like that. I don't know.
Well, and that's what my comment is. So I'm gonna skip ahead a little bit, but I mean, in playing an hour of Revelations 2, they did it. They made it just a single button press where your dodge is just that.
Okay.
So I think that there's lessons learned here that whenever we get to Revelations 2, in the podcast, like, that we'll talk about at that point. But even within my first hour of Revelations 2, it's like, things like that, were a huge thing, where I feel that this game could have felt even better in its combat and movement and like all of its things if it had things like that. It's cool that it's there. I'm glad that it exists, but I don't think that the way that the developer set it up to be like a multi-press thing like really worked for this title in particular. It's too fast paced of a game for that,
Yeah. No, I kind of see that. I was trying to think the whole time like what the dodge maneuver was to do in Resident Evil 3. And I couldn't remember if it. I know it has something to do with like you hold R1 to have the gun up, and then I'm like, well, I wonder if like was it forward and like X in that one or something like that too? Maybe that's what it was. And I say because like when you play it, like you could probably get by for the most part, not dodging too much, here and there maybe on the easy mode. But gosh, on that like even just being on the normal mode, like when I had to do that Rachel battle,
Oh, I can't
it was
imagine.
like dodge, dodge, dodge because it was just like now you get one shot in, two shot in, dodge, one shot in, maybe two shots, dodge, and then you get to the point where you're like, no, I'm gonna pull the sniper rifle out, which is not fast enough to shoot her. It's the only thing that's going to do enough damage because it it does like 3 times more damage than all the other guns. But it's trying to shoot somebody running at you at full speed with a sniper rifle, like a bolt action sniper rifle of all things.
Yep.
Oh man, but yeah, I'm glad they have it in there because I do think the dodge thing is cool because a lot of survival horror games don't have a dodge feature.
Oh, yeah.
It's not a very common button, strange enough in them, but yeah, as I said, it is there, and for the most part, I feel like it works pretty decent. Like I was pretty good at just you could watch the guy come lunge at you and you're like, aha, boom, dodge. There you go.
Yeah.
Some enemies have kind of weird movements that like you think you dodge and then you just end up getting caught.
So probably part of it too is in casual mode, your weapons kill things so quickly that I don't think the game forces you to dodge very often. So those encounters where you have to dodge, namely the final boss, bro, like I was struggling, and it could totally just be user error. It totally could be on me, just because I didn't use the feature that much. But I also wasn't using feature because it didn't feel consistent, So
yeah, well, that's even the weird one because you get that final boss. He has a very like the trying to get his dodge patterns kind of weird. Like that was one of those ones where like even on like God, that's the one too. It's like even on just casual, it's like that you get kind of beat at that battle because you think you're at the literally right place where it should be a dodge and it doesn't happen. Then Jill gets smacked around again and so on like that. And, Chris is over there in the corner shooting and I don't think he's doing much of it.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
You got this, Jill. Keep going.
Yeah.
Don't worry. I brought the pistol. Like, thank you. You could have brought anything else.
Yep. Yeah.
Because that one has this weird, like, just his timing when he goes up to swing and so on. There's even the part 2 when then he goes, like, there's 2 of them. I feel like I don't even worry about dodging anymore. And I just shoot the heart as much as can and hope for that it works. That's it. You just do the pray and spray type maneuvers. And because, I just learned I could not, for some reason, I could dodge those first couple attacks. But the second he goes to, like, the double one, it's like I could not get that timing to dodge right on there. It's just, it was not working in my favor.
Yep.
And I thought because of that Rachel battle, I got pretty good at the dodge mechanic. I was like, pretty good at this. I mean, I only had to dodge her like 100 times during that battle, so why not?
Yep. No, like I said, I mean, it's a really cool feature to have in this style of game. I just wish that it would have just been your R1 button or something. Just a single button press that you can maybe have like omnidirectional dodging, to where you can add it to a thing or whatever. It's just every time I would hit A, like X, I guess, on the PlayStation controller. I don't know, because like it's your interact button at the same time too. So like I don't know really what the proper answer is for that other than moving it to something else. But it got me killed a couple times. Basically, is what I'll put it at. It was frustrating that it didn't work well for me. And again, it totally could just be like me as the user failing at it too. But I kind of like another one that really took me by surprise is that there's no sprint in this game. Like there's no, because Resident Evil 5 had it, Resident Evil 6 had it. I was really, really surprised to not see a hold A to sprint button, like down these hallways and whatnot. But I also think that your character movement is so fast as is that in these levels are so short that you don't really need it per se.
Well,
again,
and you know what I think it is because Resident Evil 4 and 5, they have a run button. And I think what they just kind of realize with a lot of these games is they're like, nobody ever doesn't hold the button down the whole time.
Right.
I think that was just kind of what it was. And it's like, because at first it's kind of weird. Just like as an old school game player, you're like, what do you mean there's no run button? Like, I want to hold this button down anyways. They're like, yeah, I'm going to hold it down 99.99% of the time. But, and I think that's the thing is like, you don't really need to. It's like, let's be honest. You have a joystick. If you need to walk, just don't press so hard, you know? So I think this was the first game to kind of take that away because technically Resident Evil 6 I don't think does, but Resident Evil 6 adds a sprint thing. That's the
Okay.
difference.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
like I think that one you move in a sense the way this one is, but I think you could hit L3 and you can run even faster, you know.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like actually sprint.
Yeah, you can actually sprint and you can do like a flying judo kick into a zombie
Yeah.
because why
Yeah.
not?
Yeah, exactly.
At high speed.
So this game's got some fucking cool melee to it. So there's an achievement on Steam to where if you full charge hard punch something 10 times or whatever, like throughout the course of the campaign, you get this achievement. I didn't realize that was a thing, but really, it was towards the end. It was one of the God, I'm trying to think of what monster type it was. Oh, it's the dudes with the shields. You know, like the guys that have those like bioshield things or whatever. When you would down them, when they would like drop down onto one knee or whatever, and it opens them up for this like massive melee attack. And just like I just love the animation of just, you know, especially when you're playing as Parker, like he just rolls his arm way back and just, you know, winds up, then bam, just like, you know, just smacks the
Falcon punch.
Like, yeah, dude, it's funny, it's really good. But no, I was glad to see like that kind of roll over too, especially like with how ridiculous like the melee combat in RE5 was, you know, especially in co-op and whatnot. So
yeah, exactly. No, they got cool where you could charge it up and everything like that. I even like because like in this one too, they put the knife where it's literally just R2 when you don't have your gun pulled out. I'm like, that's kind of actually smart. Because at first when I was like, where the hell's the knife at again? I couldn't remember where it was on the controls. I'm like, oh, that's actually kind of a nice place to be at. It's kind of funny though because I almost like kind of barely use the knife in this game because it's not like, you know. If it was like zombies, you know, you shoot the zombie down and then you just go up and knife it to death.
Right.
But in this one, the enemies don't fall nearly the same. And it's not like in Resident Evil 4 and 5 where you can kind of shoot them in the kneecap, you know, and go up there and do that as much.
Yeah,
it's like this one, you almost want to shoot them. You want to go back to shooting them more in the head than if anything. Because you'll do like twice as much damage. And
Yep. No, and that's what I was doing the entirety of the campaign was just, you know, shooting in the head, you know. I learned really quickly too that like and again, it could just be a thing within casual mode itself or whatever, but like enemies are just so easy, you know, like to take down that I was able to like with the pistol, you know, basically like count on like 3 to 4 headshots, you know, would take out a standard BOW. Shotgun, basically like one tap to the head, you know, like and you start to like count out those types of things, you know, like as you're playing and whatnot, and you start like saving your ammo. The other piece of this is that like enemies don't really throw in such a massive threat, and again this could change in higher difficulties. I don't know, I've only played this in casual, but they have such a low threat that I was able to run through majority of this game without fighting much of anything, you know, like I was saving my ammo that way. Which also probably plays into the whole like not scanning every room, you know, type thing, because I was just kind of like running through them.
Because I feel that's sort of the trade-off. It's either do you dare kill everybody in here and then it'll allow you to scan, or do you run past it? Because I know it's like, especially in just even playing it normal and so on like that, running past is a lot more use that dodge feature and then run past the enemies is kind of like the best strategy until you get to a boss where you have to kill it.
Right. And that's a whole other thing that I think we skipped out on too, was it's gun crafting in this game is actually really interesting comparatively to what we know about, you know, like in RE4, RE5, where you are in those games, you are upgrading the totality of the weapon, you're increasing its damage and you're increasing its, you know, firepower and, you know, like rate of fire and blah blah blah. Whereas in this one, it's like we're picking up parts, but we're allowing our weapon to say like, I want this gun to have plus 10% damage, and then later on the next gun that I pick up, I want to take that same 10% damage as a module and move it to my new gun. That is really cool. I really enjoy that. You know, it feels like you can customize your guns to your liking, you know, without just being flat damage, flat accuracy, flat, you know, like things like that. Really cool, you know.
Yeah, no. I do think that this system is one of those ones where it's a pretty sweet one. You can like the way it kind of works for the survival horror in this is you only carry 3 guns at once, so you pick what you want: machine gun, shotgun, sniper, and so on. And then you find a bunch of different guns along the way, and then of course you can customize them. And the kind of neat thing is that there's a bunch of different stuff in there. So it's like, okay, yeah, you have damage, you have accuracy, you have all bigger magazine, all that kind of stuff. But then there's ones where it's like it changes the spread of your shotgun, it changes the piercing damage, it adds, you get more points, if need be, and so on like that. So there's a lot of neat variety that they kind of have that you can kind of experiment with and try things out. And I think that kind of adds into it too, because you take like a pistol that has like very low, like you have to reload it like every like enemy you kill, but like you can make the damage like really ridiculous on it.
Yeah. Yeah,
like it's a little mini Magnum or something like that.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, so I thought that all those things were really cool, because they're kind of like unique, fresh spins on what has existed before, and it's like it's very unique to this title. So I thought that was really awesome. So, but
yeah. There's other thing too. It's like I think about in this game. I remember when it came out on 3DS. I think this was the one feature I was kind of bummed it didn't have, and I think it's just kind of after Resident Evil 5. And the weird thing is the game almost is set up like it should be able to do this, but it doesn't. But it doesn't have co-op in it for the standard campaign mode.
Yeah.
And as I said, the only thing that's weird about that is the fact that literally your partner's there 90% of the time. There's like 2 or 3 chapters where like Jill goes running on her own. I think Jill's the only character that goes running on her own for the most part. And and even in those parts, it's like you could literally just work something in where it's like the other person plays as Parker and just give them like a very long puzzle that they have to do. You know what I mean?
Right.
Something like that, just to fill in that void. But I always kind of wish that was like the one thing is like, man, this game would be such a good game if you could literally have that co-op in there. It's like there's just one thing.
I am baffled that it doesn't exist, to be honest. I mean, like even if it didn't exist in its original sense, in its re-releases and whatnot, like on PlayStation, on Xbox, on whatever, Steam and whatnot, like I'm very, very surprised this does not have a co-op mode in it.
Now, granted, it does have the raid mode, which you can play co-op. You know, and sometimes I just kind of wonder if it was just really more of a 3DS technical limitation thing that kind of kept it from there, and that's why they didn't have in the campaign one, and that's why they kind of kept it as is. But you can play the raid mode, and the raid mode is one of those ones like it is literally, I kind of forgot, it's like just as good as Mercenaries on 5, but it's a little bit different. But like you could put a lot of time into it and have a good old time. And like instead of being like Mercenaries where it's like a time limit and you just got to pretty much survive like the wave, like it's like almost like a Gears of War horde mode type thing in a sense. Except for that keeps going, I guess. But this one here, it's like you just run through the level and there's a certain amount of enemies you got to kind of kill, and they have a lot of levels too, and then you just collect points, upgrade your guns better, upgrade your characters and so on, and just kind of play it over and over again. And same thing with the raid mode on the second one too, it gets even more dialed in. It's like I remember just being like, wow, this is actually really impressive, and I was playing a bit of that raid mode on the Switch version, and it's one of those ones too, I'm still so surprised that I could turn a game on and just wait like a couple minutes and boop, up somebody's there. Lo and behold, there's people you're playing with, and it's like it always kind of blows my mind. Like when I turn on some of those older games, I just kind of go, I wonder, here we're playing a game that's 13 years old or something by now, and you're like, is there going to be just somebody on there? Do I have to go to like a special group on like a forum and try to find something? Oh, no, there's people playing.
Right. Yeah, so I mean, I think like I don't know. I mean, if you want to like continue on with this like story and whatnot, it's really just kind of bouncing around between all these different characters on this ship and like just their versions of what is happening all within the same time period and whatnot. Probably like one of the more notable ones that I was talking to you about, like as it was happening in my playthrough, was the underwater levels and whatnot.
Oh yeah.
So there's a certain point where like we find out like Jessica's kind of like this double agent, and she's working for the terrorists, but she's also working for us, and blah blah blah, and oh shit, she wants to blow up the ship, and she sets off the self-destruction sequence, and Parker dies for the first time in this game at that point. And then it like switches back to Jill, and like like the ships are sinking and blah 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 and this, that, and the other. But the holes are starting to fill up, and I thought that because because I'm always like pretty critical about video games that do underwater level design, and this game does it proper. It does it right. It feels good, and I genuinely enjoyed this section of the game. Going area to area, diving underneath like wreckage and whatnot, picking up keys, opening up new doors, climbing ladders. This game is very vertical, and which is really weird to me in the course of like, we're in a ship, which also is like one other quick mechanic that I wanted to talk about was its map. I think that its 3D map that it has within its like map viewer mode or whatever is really cool. I really like how that was done.
Yeah, no, that is kind of a neat bonus feature. I know sometimes I get a little bit turned around when I look at that map comparatively. I just know like, oh, okay, there we go. That's the, because like I feel like you only pull it up every once in a while when you just feel like, wait a second, where do I need to go again? But it is cool because it just shows like the depth and everything in there and so on like that, and just adds for a bonus kind of extra way that you can take a look at your map along with your flat kind of Metal Gear Solid looking one.
Yep. So so that map was actually kind of helpful, especially in this underwater section. There's a certain point where your map kind of like it either goes away or it's like temporarily disabled or whatever. Because like there was a couple sections that I remember playing through the tail end of this game where your map isn't physically up in your upper right corner, and you're more or less like just looking at the level as you're playing through it, going like, oh yeah, I remember that door. Oh yeah, I remember that room. I remember this. Oh yep, if I go through there, I can. So I wish that it had more of that. I really do. I wish that this game had more map list design. It's cool to have a mini map. It's really convenient, but it really took away the scare factor for me. And majority of the rooms that had a ton of enemies in it, it's just like, well, I know I can run through that door, at the end of the hall. So I'm just going to skirt around these guys, because I'll be safe on the other side of that door and blah, 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 So one comment that I will have about it is like, I wish that it didn't have the mini map, or at least had a toggable option, for it, to where you can get more intimate with the actual levels themselves, and like, I don't know. I think you understand what I mean,
Yeah, no, I know what you mean by that or so on. It's like one of those weird ones where it's like, I get that, but it's like at the same time, it's like just for running around sake, it's so nice to be able to go like, okay, when you're kind of planning it out is, it's almost like I like the mini map way over the fact of having to press select every single time I want to go to it. By far, it's either that or it's like, or you have no map at all. But then again, I can't imagine a Resident Evil game that has no map at all.
Right.
It's like a weird takeaway and so on like that. I was gonna say, going back to the swimming thing in it. Yeah, I will say I agree with you too, because there's actually a lot of swimming parts in there, more than you would think. It's like maybe like 6 episodes that have swimming in it, and the swimming is definitely dialed in, because that is always one of those like parts in video games. It's like the dreaded swimming part. Like, is it going to be one of those? And it's like, no, this one's smooth, and boy, does Jill, she can breathe for like 5 minutes. It almost feels like.
Christ, seriously.
But I'm kind of glad they do that too, because it's like I would rather have that be, don't I always feel like when you get a part in a game that's like completely different gameplay, it's like, don't make that the difficult part. Let that just be what it is. You know what I mean? It's like, if you want the difficulty, make it be a boss battle, make it be any of that, but don't make when the controls are going to all change on you and so on. But
it wouldn't work with some of the monster types that are in the water, because the animations that play like are so long, dude. Like and what I'm talking about is like the little like ammonite like creature thing with like the million little legs that like grab onto you and whatnot, and Jill's like kicking and screaming and then like kicks it away and then stabs it with the knife and whatnot. Like that whole sequence in its totality is like probably a good like 10 to 15 seconds, of like it initially grabbing you, button mashing to get the thing off of you, and then stabbing it, for you to kick off and then finally regain control of your character. It's probably like a good 10, 15 seconds, which is nuts.
Well, and there's some of those battles too that I don't think you can technically skip, because I was thinking about them, like I think you kind of have to just run into them almost. Like there's a couple of them you could probably skirt around, but I think you're meant to actually grab them, or they're supposed to grab you and you fight them off. And so, because I'd also noticed they didn't really do much damage, so I think it was more to be a cutscene, if anything like that. And add that kind of terror. But it's good that Jill can breathe for quite a long time, and even just swimming through there, it's like, it's easy to maneuver. The controls are smooth, and it doesn't have any of those issues of like inversion where like they switch it up. Because sometimes that's the problem with a lot of games. It's like, game will be totally fine, but then they get to a moment like that, and now the inverted controls have gone out the window, and it's like, thank you. Now I'm going to have a really hard time moving through here.
Yep. Yeah. So I thought that whole section I thought was actually very well done. I really enjoyed all that. And then like I guess like in terms of like set piece puzzles, probably the most interesting one to me was there's a door that you have to get through where you're in a casino. You have to pick up coins and you have to like use a certain amount of coins to get the right amount of weight to place down this like weight pad thing that this like waitress thing's holding or whatever to open up this door. That, and you see it in my playthrough too. Like I sat there for a minute going like, like I couldn't quite wrap my head around. Like I understood we need 107 grams, but the penny weighs 7 grams, the dime weighs blah blah blah, and like just trying to figure out like in my head the math and whatnot. And eventually it was just kind of like a trial by error type thing, like yep. I just figured it out. But,
yeah, that's generally what I do a very sale time. And then mostly it feels like whenever I solve it, I kind of always go, oh, that was actually easier than I thought. For some reason, I felt like I overthink it because I realized you don't use the silver at all. You don't need to use the silver. Just use the gold, get it up there, and then use the bronze to dial it in. Yep. And that's kind of about it. But each time, I still always kind of do it. It's like they have those, and then they have also the little door puzzles where you unscrew it, and then you have to put the wires around. It's not like they're challenge. They're like the perfect amount where it's like it's just the most minor amount of challenge. It's kind of fun. And it gives you just enough satisfaction for a little teeny puzzle without like ever getting too stuck or anything like that.
Well, and again, I think if you have the mindset of this is a Resident Evil game that was created for the 3DS for quick 20-30 minute short burst sessions, like all of this stuff that we're talking about makes 100% sense to me. Like, and I really hope I'm not coming off like I'm complaining about any of this stuff. I'm just saying how it is, comparatively to something like Resident Evil 5, Resident Evil 6, Resident Evil 4, like full-fledged, console, like full-on titles. Whereas this feels like that it is a full-on title. This is a full-fledged Resident Evil title, but it's designed for the 3DS. So you have to keep that in mind when considering, like anything about this game. Mm-hmm. And in that sense, I think that it's extremely well done for the 3DS. Playing in 2025 on Steam, isn't, I don't think that this is like mind-boggling or it's going to change my mind about the series and be my favorite or and all of that. Like that's not what this is to me, but I appreciate that it exists because of the 3DS elements of it. And it's cool that I can play it on PC at this point, So.
Yeah, they released it for everything. Well, speaking of even those, like we're talking about those wire puzzles real quick. I think on those ones on the 3DS, you were supposed to use the stylus and line it up there on the touch screen, which makes total sense. Like it's just all those small things like there, and it would have been a little bit more interactive, of course. If you're playing it that version.
Sure. Yep.
But it's one of those ones that's just playing it over again. It just kind of reminds me of like how much I really like this one. And I think it's actually one of the more top tier Resident Evil games, more than people would give it credit for.
Sure.
It kind of is looked upon as it's sort of just like a side shoot game, but I think it's more than that, really. In fact, I would say it's actually probably more Resident Evil than a lot of other games because it stars Jill and Chris. To me, like that makes it more of a main series than literally like 7 or 8 or any of those other ones that might carry a number, you know.
It had me hooked. This game, and especially the way that it sets itself up with like, so ultimately there's 12 total chapters, and I played them in 3 chapter bursts. Like I played chapter 1 through 3, and then 4 through 6, and then like and all the way up through 12 and whatnot. And basically played them in sessions like that of like 2-ish hours, to 3-ish, somewhere around there. Like in totality, I think I had like 8 total hours in the game, like start to finish. I think my actual play time itself was around 4 or 5-ish hours, something like that, probably closer to 5. But I mean, like in general, I think it was totally fine. Like I really, really enjoyed this streamlined, handy little title. I thought it was really cool.
Yeah, that's the thing is I think it's like the perfect length. It doesn't drag on, because I think it's one of those ones. I think it doesn't count when it counts your time. Because I want to say my game said that like I beat the game in like 4 hours and like 57 minutes or something like that. But I don't think it counts. But then there's probably an hour's worth of cutscenes and stuff like that. You know what I mean? That makes it kind of extend out. But Yeah, it's really like the perfect kind of little quick playthrough that's fun, engaging. It's got a good new game plus because all your guns carry on over, and you can change the difficulty, so you can do it Devil May Cry style.
Mm-hmm.
So you can work
Mm-hmm.
your way up the tier, which is always kind of cool because some games it's like, you want to play a Nightmare? We'll start off with the pistol. Good luck.
Yeah.
Well, it's
Yeah.
kind of cool when you can work up your way up to it and go, okay, cool. I've kind of built my way up. I've gotten better at the game. I've gotten used to all the stuff, and yeah. So there's that. There's enough little like bonuses and stuff in there too, and then the
Mm-hmm.
fact that the raid mode's so good still is that's almost like a second half of the game in a sense, And granted, that's probably what they did to make it feel like if you didn't have that in there, the game would feel kind of short. But it's one of those ones. Not that's a bad thing. I personally kind of prefer this is like a perfect length in my opinion of a video game.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
I get kind of iffy when games start to get to that real long section where you're like, okay, it's 20 hours long. Like I probably won't be coming back to this very often. But if it's only like 5 or 6 hours, man, you could throw that on all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. And really, like I am so curious to see the differences between this and Revelations 2. I can't wait to play RE or Revelations 2, to actually like have this type of comparison. Because I mean, like I think at the end of the day here, like this is a very solid RE title. It very much, like I said from the get-go, it reminded me a lot of Resident Evil 5 in terms of playstyle. Like it just feels like RE5 to me. It has elements of classic RE, with puzzles and key elements and unlocking doors and backtracking and like all the things that you would imagine like exist. This feels more Resident Evil, quote unquote, than Resident Evil 5 did, which I think is a great thing. It's obvious that Capcom was trying something new here. I think that they were at this time, and you and I have talked about it quite extensively about like the survival horror burn of the early 2000s, and this existing within the realm of RE's action-based titles and still trying to grasp, or at least like it, I can see the attempt to try to make original fans of RE like happy with this, to where it's like, we're still going to give you the fast-paced action stuff with all the over-the-shoulder gun shooting and quick turns and blah 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 and all this type of stuff. We're adding a dodge mechanic. We're adding 3D maps and blah blah blah. But we're still going to give you backtracking and doors that have like keys that you're going to get way later on and come back to open up this door to go back through this section of this area and blah blah blah. Like all these things. I think in general, it's such a solid title. Like I was stoked that I got it on on G2A for like $2 or whatever, but like kind of common like we've been doing in the podcast. Like I think that it's cost versus entertainment value, I think warrants the $20 that Steam asks for this game, on any normal Tuesday. It's wonderful. I think it's a great game.
Yeah, no, I think you get a whole lot of value for it. I definitely think it's the one that's like for anybody who was kind of turned off by survival horrors in like the late 2000s and the early 2010s. I always felt it was this one and Revelations 2 were always the one like, dude, check these games out. Like this will give you kind of your classic vibes, of a little bit of modern control schemes and so on like that. It's like the perfect blend of both worlds, and they're one of those ones that they're great games. And it's just cool because it's like it actually feels really Resident Evil for the fact you're playing as Jill, you got Chris there, even the other characters and so on like that. I love the graphics, I love the look of it. There's really not a whole lot, the complaint. It's like there's some kind of a little bit bizarre elements, but that doesn't detract from anything. They actually just almost make things more interesting sometimes. But they got those terrible invisible hunters too. We never mentioned those, but
oh yeah.
That's the one I always feel like on the nightmare difficulty. Talk about that's gonna be terrible.
Yeah,
it's just one of those things. They get you, and you sometimes don't even. There's not even enough time to dodge because you can't see them.
No, they messed me up. They never killed me, but they messed me up pretty good because their invisibility. So like most games will have like an invisible character or whatever, but you can almost always like tell an outline of something or a shadow or whatever. Like no shit in this game. They fucking go invisible. Like they are not on screen until they move a little bit and then they shimmer. They just have this like little like shimmer to them. I forgot about that enemy type too. See, but that's kind of the thing with this game is like because of its episodic nature, like I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around like the totality of its story and everything like that. But I remember all these like bits of pieces of like key elements of the game, and that's really what's sticking with me is, and I think it plays into its episodic nature, you know. So that's what I would say to any audience member like actually listening to this is like it was designed for quick 20-30 minute place experiences. You should probably, you know, think of the game or walk into the game expecting that, you know, instead of like this huge I mean, there is an overarching plot and that exists, and, you know, and it is what it is. But you know, and there's some cool set pieces and stuff. Like I loved right at the end of the game, like it again, it just reminds me of RE5. Like you get on turrets and you're shooting down, you know, the things as you're speeding towards, you know, like the big boat in the distance and whatnot. You know, these large tentacles are coming up out of the water, and just fun. I just give this game like a stamp rating of just fun. You know, it's just like it just has it. It's a good time. You know, like. And again, with its episodic nature of like me wanting to sit down and play 3 episodes at a time, really is a testament, because if I really didn't like the game like this I would have been struggling to get through it, you know, and like probably wouldn't have recorded it, probably wouldn't have, you know, like anything like that. So one major complaint though, I hated the way they treated Parker in this game. It's the one character thing. So I had mentioned earlier, like there's one section where Jessica is like, oh, I'm the double agent and I'm gonna blow up this ship and blah blah blah, and like wants to kill Raymond, and then like Parker's just being the big heart, you know, softy that he is, dives in front of the bullet as Jessica's trying to kill Raymond or whatever. Parker falls on the ground. Jessica and Raymond leave that area. They leave him on the deck of the ship and whatnot. The ship blows up. It's implied, okay, Parker's dead. Okay.
Yeah.
A little while later, you're playing as Jill. Now the ship's sinking at this point. Jill's like running around in the below decks and whatnot. And you're, you know, like everything's filling up with water and you're sprinting around and you're trying to get out. And you turn this corner and like, and first I thought it was a BOW. I was about to start laying them, you know, lighting them up and whatnot. Oh shit, no, it's Parker. Parker survived that explosion initially. Cool. Such a heart-filled moment, dude. Of yeah, hell yeah, cool. Parker's alive. You know, Jill runs down, like gets underneath him, picks him up. We start hobbling out together and whatnot.
I do gotta say this at that point. I love how it's like, because literally you find Chris there, and Chris is like, and Jill's like, oh, like. Chris, this guy who's about twice the size of Jill, it's like, Jill, you got Parker, right? Yeah. Yeah, you carry him out. I'll give you cover fire.
So, like, and then you're getting out of the ship, and then another explosion happens as you're crossing over this mezzanine, like, bridge thing and whatnot, and then it's just like this, just classic dude dangling from the edge, hanging on as tight as he can, and there's fire and death underneath him, and he's slipping, you know, and Jill reaches down and grabs him by the wrist and starts to pull him up, and then Chris grabs him by the other wrist and starts to pull him up, and then it's just like this long drawn out, like, you know, 15 seconds of like, I can't hold you. Well, you need to hold me. Well, I'm going to let go. No, you're not going to let go. But nothing's said. It's like, and it's actually very tastefully done. I really enjoyed this portion of the game of like Parker's death, you know, because he just like more or less just says like, adios amigos, you know, and just like, just basically just lets go and falls into the fire. And I thought it was such a cool, because there was no over the top, like, Parker, you know, like, you know, all drama.
Hey,
no, you know, like, you know, there was none of that. It was very tastefully done, and I was accepting of this. I was like, cool, you fooled me once in the first part where you blew up Parker, but now he survived. Now he's actually dead. It felt appropriate to me.
Yep.
To literally getting to the end of the game and credits are rolling at this point, and it's like going character, like still frame a character, and like, here's what happened. It's like that style of ending, you know, where it just has text based. And Parker fucking survived. Why? Why did you puss out at the end, Capcom, you know?
Well, there's actually a couple of them too, because it's like literally no main character suffers any loss in this game, which is kind of like, you know, it's funny because it's like Resident Evil 1, like literally like 75% of the team members die in that game. Mm-hmm. You know, it's only Jill, Chris, Rebecca, that's it, and Barry that make it out. Nobody else makes it. at all. That is the only ones. And then like in this one here, it's like everybody makes it. Like, yeah, Parker somehow was like, oh, we found it. He was floating out at sea. How about that? You know, and then same with like there's the two dumb nephew kids and stuff. And when they're down there doing the computer hack and everything like that, they're supposed to be like, oh no, they just summoned the hammer of dawn on them and somehow.
Right.
And of course they walk out of that too. Like, wow, we just survived, you know. Hey, what about that? I don't know how that happened. It's like, you know, it's like, what?
Well, and that's what one of my first questions to Spence was after I finished the game was just like, okay, Barry's. I mean, not Barry. I keep calling him Barry.
He literally could have been Barry. Like that's the thing is like you could literally put Barry in that exact same role. It would every single thing would have worked totally fine.
Right. You know, so that is one comment to say about the very end of the game is like post credits. There is one more scene of Jessica sitting in this diner or whatever, and this like, you know, shaded hooded man, you know, comes up and drops a vial off in front of her, and no shit, it's fucking Raymond. You know, it's the redheaded, you know, like rookie dude from earlier. And they have this like brief conversation about Parker, and Parker gets brought up, and Jessica more or less like asks Raymond like, so why'd you do it? Why'd you save him? You know, and it's like heavily implied that like Raymond saved him from the ship, and that's why he's still alive, and now he's still back in, you know, New York City with the FBC again, and blah blah blah, and this that, and the other. And I asked Spence at this point because I'm like, okay, cool. There's a plot hook now. What happens in Rev 2? You know, like what happens in Revelations 2? And you're like, yeah, I don't think Revelations 2 has anything to do with any of these characters or any of this plot. And it's like, again, why Capcom? Why?
Yeah, they give so much there, and it's like I think, I guess, if trying to just piece it together, what happens? Raymond saves Parker because Parker saved Raymond and Terra Grigia, whatever. Right. So he felt like he owed him one. Yeah. So there's that, but it's still like it takes away from like that. I feel like that's.
But he says he has plans for him. Raymond straight says he's like, I have plans for that guy or for, you know, Parker or whatever, and it's like, well, what is that? You know?
Yeah. So there's something about I think that kind of like, you know, Jessica, it's like I don't know where this gets implied in somewhere else, but if she's taking that virus to give it to the chick in Resident Evil 5, the other you know, chick that just dresses however she feels like in a combat situation. Eva,
I forgot her name too.
Whatever. I'm pretty sure that's kind of how it sort of connects, but it doesn't really explain much. Yeah. You know, but is that virus gets taken there, it goes to Africa, yada yada yada, is used for, you know, something or another there. Maybe that's what she injects herself with and so on. But yeah, kind of solved there. But yeah, it's almost like you need a sort of another one to sort of explain it. And I want to say because I haven't played Revelations 2 since it probably came out, but I want to say no. I want to say that one's its own original story that does. Maybe there might be some small stuff, but like
crazy.
It's more just here's Claire and Barry. Just once again, Claire and Barry that like a kind of weird team up, and with two other random ass characters that have nothing to do with anything else. A little girl and another little girl who refuses to shoot a gun.
Yep.
And they made that one co-op. That's what I think about. Like that's when you want to punish your friend to come on over and be like, yeah, we're gonna play this co-op. Oh, this sounds like fun. Guess what? You're gonna play the girl that only has a crowbar. Or vice versa. We'll play the other mode, and you can play the little girl who only drops bricks on zombies' heads. Yeah, which actually sounds more badass than it really. Well, I guess it is kind of cool, but like that's her only attack. She takes a brick and she drops it on, you know, a head of a zombie.
Yeah.
So it's weird. That's the one that had the co-op in it. When Revelations 1 could have totally had the co-op, but
yeah.
But yeah, no, that ending's kind of weird. I think Parker should have just died. I think that would have made it more dramatic. That's the perfect one. It's like, you know, he's not in a sense a main Resident Evil character, but at least you kind of have that. And even the dumb nephews, I think you could have not even explained that and nobody would care.
Well, like I said, those two characters in particular in the totality of this game, it's like they easily could have just been cut out entirely with no other changes. Just remove their levels, and I don't think this game would have been any different, you know?
Well, I hate to say you could have made their levels sort of like maybe even the second half of Chris's like thing. That could have been legitimately, you could have even said Jessica was the hacker person, whatever, gives her more of a role to do. Chris protects her, you know, there when those like all those enemies kind of jump on in, and that could have, 100%. It could have just been one more little episode just for Chris in the Arctic, and that would have been it.
Yeah.
Because even one of the levels you play with them is actually one of those weird levels where it's a chapter that you literally do not fight anything.
Yep. Yeah, I'd say Yeah, just to kind of round all this out. I mean, just in general, I think it's a fine enough game. I am really glad that I did play it because this was Revelations and Revelations 2 were literally the only two RE games I didn't have on Steam. And like I know I've asked a handful of different people about this game in particular. Some say no, fuck it, don't buy it. It's kind of a piece of crap game and whatnot. Like people hate it. But then then I hear from you, and you're just like, no, like if you liked RE5 and you liked recent things that we've been playing and whatnot, like yeah, let's give this a shot. Let's give this a roll. Kind of at this point, like I'm down for anything. Like I'll play anything at this point, and I'm very, very glad we picked this one up. I'm glad it's in my library because it's a game that I can always go back to. It's a real short and sweet experience. If you want fast paced, real quick, 20-minute action, on the go, even better. Put this on your Steam Deck. You're solid. Like I mean,
yep.
It's a really, really cool game. I really enjoyed it in its totality.
Yeah, and I just think it's good fun. It's got great cutscenes in it and so on like that. I think, as I mentioned it earlier, but I love the look of this game. It's like one of those ones, like the character. I think everything about it is just really dialed in, and for that experience. And then the fact that, like, just when you're playing it, always think of it like this was a 3DS game. I think when you think of it, just call it a Game Boy game. That makes it feel really impressive when you say it like that. Like it was made for that, and the fact that like it still looks really good on consoles and Steam and all that stuff too. Because I think I own this game multiple times. I have the 3DS one, I have the Wii U, I have it on Switch, and I have it on Steam.
Yeah.
Just like many of my other Resident Evils, I own them on so many systems. But it's just cool, and it's just like it's got a great raid mode if you want to have some fun co-op or just play with random people online. It just delivers a lot, and it's one of those ones. It's like it's funny how there is people, because I've known that before too, that they just couldn't get around to this one, and it's like they like survival horrors and everything like that. It's like it's like it's a weird one too if you say you like Resident Evil 4 but you can't get behind this. If you didn't like Resident Evil 4, I could understand that, but it's always such a strange one. It's like you liked Resident Evil 4, but for some reason Revelations doesn't hit the same thing for you or whatnot. But I just think it's kind of one of those Resident Evil gems that like just kind of gets put off as like a spin-off. But I would say it's actually better than some of like the mainline series ones even too. I think it's that good. And Revelations 2 I remember being really good as well too. I think this one always stood out to me just a little bit more. But the second one, I remember it goes deeper and kind of a little bit more horror. It's got zombies returning and all kinds of stuff like that too.
Cool.
I think it's just a good spinoff. I wish they would have made more of these Revelations ones. I felt like what kind of replaced it was the remakes. I think kind of replaced in a sense this, because if you didn't have, I guess, the remakes to kind of fill it, if it was just say 7 and 8 was the only ones that came out, I think people would be like, what the hell is going on here? Like you almost needed something to kind of, fill in for the classic fans, you know what I mean? Because 7 and 8 are almost like, if you play them as not Resident Evil games, they're great. But if you look at them like Resident Evil games, they feel, you go, this is so off. I don't know what is going on here.
Yeah, like exactly.
But
no, I'm actually even surprised. Like, I mean, even if like I would even think like if Capcom like wanted to go like Android and iOS, I think like a title like this in the episodic nature, the way that it's built and whatnot, like totally would work. Not to say, please, Capcom, please don't put the mainline RE title on mobile. Please don't do it. But but I think you get what I'm saying. Is just like the way that this game is designed, and I think it plays well into those strengths. I'm actually very surprised that Revelations 3 doesn't exist, at this point. So,
well, you mentioned that though. I mean, this is not like obviously it didn't premiere on there, but they put Resident Evil 4 remake on iPhone, and I heard that was a pretty dialed in, and that was more like one of those ones like, let's test to see if this kind of works kind of thing. And, can we have a really legitimate game on there? And I hate to say it, this day and age, as long as you just buy a Bluetooth controller, which it seems like everybody should have one, the phone is literally your new Game Boy if you turn it into that. The thing is, like, there's so many games that I've talked about it so many times, but it's like, it's funny because I never really meet anybody else who ever does this, but it's like, I use the Game Pass and the Amazon Luna, and I've even used the the Nvidia's one. I tried that one out too, which was pretty neat because it connects to some of your games in Steam Store. Not enough of them, in my opinion. In time, I think it will be actually pretty legitimate. Or at least all the games I had were just a bunch of old PC games. That didn't work. But I think it's one of those ones. It's like you can have a pretty solid experience on like a mobile device as long as you just get your setup right. I think that's the thing is people think like, oh, it's just a touch control. So hook a controller up to it. Next thing you know, you literally have yourself in a sense a 3DS, a PSP, all that kind of stuff. And I think that would be cool to continue that Revelations one and just utilize your classic characters. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
You could make a Revelations 3 and put Rebecca and somebody else in there. That'd be kind of a cool, like, yeah, there you go. Combine maybe Rebecca and Carlos even or something like that. Just trying to think of two characters that only had one game realistically.
Sure.
But yeah, there's tons of things to be done with it, but I think it's one of those ones. If anybody out there has not played these ones and you've had them sort of like sit in the back, like I just never knew, it's like, and you felt wishy washy about it, like literally grab them. They go on sale all the time. Yeah. You can legitimately get them on any system, and I think it's one of the If you want to be a true Resident Evil fan, like I think this is one of those ones that sits there highly, and it's like it's a damn good game, a whole lot of fun to be had, and I can't wait till we do Revelations 2 whenever too, because. As I said, I remember that one in very high regards of it being literally just another really good experience.
Oh yeah,
and so on. But yeah, beyond all that fun stuff, you can go check out more of Old Man Orange and Island Evil podcast at YouTube, as well as Spotify and all that good stuff. Till then, I'm Spencer Scott Holmes.
I am Cameron.
And